The Sandy and Toddcast is a Mindgarden Media podcast in association with
Screw You, Todd
Productions.
Broadcasting from two very different yet magical places not found on any map. Get ready to discuss the strange, weird, ghostly, crazy, spooky, and odd things that take place around us each and every day. All while having a little bit of fun. This is the Sandy and Toddcast.
Welcome again to the Sandy and Toddcast. She is Sandy.
He is Todd.
And we are talking weird stuff, as always, on the Sandy and Toddcast. How was your Valentine's Day? Did you do anything special with poor Dave?
Well, here's the deal. We live in central New York State. I hate winter. So does he. Nobody wants to leave the house right now because we've been pummeled by snow and cold weather. Essentially, we hibernate from about mid-December through, mid-March, and only go out when we have to. So Valentine's Day was really low-key for us. We did cards for each other, and he got me some candy that I like, sugar-free Jelly Bellies. and we just hung out, and, we appreciate each other all the time. So, did you do anything?
No, ma'am. Nope. Nope.
So, I would think it's safe to say that our Valentine's Day was very low-key.
Yeah, my birthday was last week, and didn't do anything for that. And Valentine's Day really didn't do anything for that, so...
It used to be, I think when I was younger, things like that were like a much bigger deal.
Yeah.
Now that I have not worked outside of the home in 5 years, it'll be 5 years next month. And I'm not out in the public eye all the time. It used to be that I used to love when I worked in an office setting or in a radio setting, I loved getting flowers for different occasions because who doesn't love flowers? They're beautiful. But now I don't want flowers because where would I put them? Because I have cats and I can't let my cats near my flowers. So I could put them in the bedroom with the door closed. I could put them in the studio, but I'm not in the studio 24 hours a day. And I have real assholes for cats. So, we just keep it low key. It's not as big of a deal. Birthdays are nice. We used to go out on our birthday, but we don't really go out on our birthday anymore. We used to go away for a weekend for our birthdays because he's on the 2nd and I'm on the 6th of February. So we'd celebrate together. We just celebrate really low key. It's the older you get, it's the less you kind of go crazy over things.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
Doesn't mean that you don't care about people, but it's just not as big
I don't care about you. Just told me before we did the podcast. I hate people. You said it like 4 times.
I hate people except the people I care about.
Yeah, I know.
But
you know what I find is it's very difficult to sometimes even care about them because you're so inundated with stupid people that you don't want to deal with. You don't have what it takes to deal with the people you care about. You just want to shut down and deal with nobody.
It's true, especially as empaths, right? Especially as empaths, because you're taking in even more. And it's kind of funny. It's almost like you just described like being a crusty old person, only we're not really crusty old people yet. So I think it's just happening at a younger age. I just don't have the patience for it anymore. When I was out in the public eye all the time, I would put on the character because that was my job.
Yeah.
When I was in corporate banking, oh my God, I was in corporate banking for over 2 decades in management. And as a manager, you had to be nice or at least cordial. And then I was in radio, and then I'm playing the part the character that I made for myself, that I created. And so I could be that other person that was so nice to people. But now I don't care anymore. I've seen enough. I've been through enough. I've heard enough. I'm not going to pretend anymore. You know?
Yeah.
I know that sounds horrible, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
You know, I think that as you get older, that filter starts to kind of die away a little bit, and you get a little more true to yourself and who you truly are. And I think my journey, my psychic, my paranormal investigative journey, my aging process, all of and the experiences that we've all had, especially in the past several years, has made us a little bit more, for the most part, made us a little bit more true to ourselves and who we are. And I'm okay with that. I feel better being myself and not what society would expect me to be.
Right.
I like that. I like being who I am, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't say that I like being who I am, but
I know what you mean, though.
I'm just tired. I want to throw this out there really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, as a nation, we're going through a lot right now, and I'm not here to talk politics, but those who are like us, who are struggling a little bit through this because of the empath or whatever it is, right? It's interesting because I have been speaking with my cousins a little bit, and we were talking about, my God, it's only mid-February, and it feels like 40 years have taken place since January 1st. Yeah. And so one of my cousins said that she went to see an energy worker because she's been going through a lot, anxiety, sleeplessness, blah, blah, blah. And the energy worker told her, after this, there's supposed to be 1,000 years of peace. Unfortunately, we'll be dead by the time it starts. So to me, that sounds like we got a long way to go before this ends.
Yeah. And I will be honest with you, and this really is not political. I will be honest with you, but we are entering, because let's face it, at this point, nothing is political anymore. It's just, it's not us against them, because it's a very few people against the entire country. Regardless of whether anybody wants to see it that way or not, that's what it is. And so it's going to take a long time. Somebody said the other day in a forum, you reminded me of this. Somebody said the other day, will we ever come back from this? And somebody said, yes, but it's going to take at least a couple of generations to come back from this. And I mean, it was just a regular person saying this. It wasn't an energy worker. It wasn't anyone. It was just a normal person. But I felt like it was the voice of reason and understanding, because that's the only time I'd ever seen anybody say that. And I think a lot of us are holding on to hope that this will change in 2 years. And if not in 2 years, this will change in 4 years. But I think that the path, and I don't want to scare anybody, but it's the truth. I think that the path and the direction that we're on right now is not one that can be fixed in 2 years or 4 years.
Yeah.
I would agree. I mean, you're 55, I'm 54. We're not young anymore. We're not 22. I don't think that we may not be here when this is fixed. And I hate to say that because it breaks my heart. And so many people are going to pay for this that never asked for it. But I do. I kind of tend to agree with what your cousin told you, because when I saw that, it really hit me hard. It hit home.
Yeah.
That this may not be the end. This may be the end for us. essentially.
Well, I think the end has already happened, right? So
yeah.
So
So
yeah.
I get it. I understand what you're saying. And it's, I mostly worry. I worry for myself. I worry for my husband. I worry for the people that I love. But I mostly worry. I see on social media people doing gender reveals and people announcing the birth of their grandchildren or their sister's children. And I think to myself, I would be terrified, absolutely terrified to bring a child into this world at this point in time. Terrified.
I actually had acquaintance on that I met through the work that I do on a daily basis, who said to me, I don't even remember what the conversation was, but he said, my wife and I don't want to bring kids into this world. And it's just, I don't want, this isn't a political thing necessarily, but I wonder what will it take for people to go, okay, this isn't so good.
And can we stop it when they do?
By the time anybody who thinks they're benefiting from this realizes how effed up it is, I think it's going to be too far gone.
I do too, unfortunately. And it makes it even worse for those of us who care about others. And it's not just empaths. You can have empathy for other people, other beings, animals, people. You can have empathy for them and not necessarily be an empath. And what I'm coming across, though, is that there are so many people that I'm coming across so many people that have zero empathy. They don't care. They just don't care. And I've always been the kind of person that says, okay, if something is broken, let's fix it. But let's fix it the right way. That's not an option anymore. And that really frightens me. And I feel like those of us who do have empathy, empath or not, we can't get through to the people who don't because they don't care. When it will bother them, and I'm not saying they'll be able to fix it, but when it will bother them is when they lose the things that they depend on every day. Because everything that's going on right now is wide sweeping. It's going to trickle down to everyone. So in other words, if you don't care about people in Africa, or you don't care about people in Eastern Europe or Western Europe, that's your prerogative. But when that happens, when things get affected for people in other parts of the world, there is a trickle down. You may not see it right away, but there is a trickle down, and that's going to affect the people that you love. When your 6-year-old child who's been stricken with neuroblastoma can't get the care that they need because that kind of care is not available anymore, that's going to hit you. That's trickle down. When your daughter is pregnant and will die if they don't do something, and she can't, so she dies, that's trickle down. It's an important thing to keep in mind as we move forward in this. And unfortunately, those of us who can foresee this happening, as many of us as there are, there's just as many who don't. And it just is breaking my heart all the way around, because there are going to be victims of this who never asked for this. They just never asked for this. So, and that's not political in any way. This is is the state. This is the position that we are in now. Regardless of where you stand politically, this is where we're at. And I think it hurts even more for those of us who are aware of what's happening and understand what's going on because we see it coming. You know, imagine the fear in somebody's eyes when they're standing at the brick wall and here comes the speeding train and they know it's coming, as opposed to the person who doesn't. So we're all going to get to the same place with that speeding train, but, you know, it's harder on us. So I see exactly where you're coming from, you know?
And I'll just back that up and end the conversation by saying, again, we don't lean very political on this podcast. Right after the election, I think we had a conversation about stuff, and we got a message from somebody who said, I'm done listening because I don't tune to this for that. And it's like, bye.
But we also got an email from someone at the same time who said, thank you for this podcast. So validating, and I appreciate you taking a stand. I'm scared and worried, and your past episode helped. Thank you. And that was sent on November 12th.
Just so people understand, we discuss this stuff as empaths because all the turmoil that's going on, and some folks may not see it that way, but all the turmoil that's going on around the world because of decisions that we made here in the United States, we feel that, right? And so that's why it's discussed. So if you don't like it, sorry, we don't talk about it all the time. You can do one of two things. You can skip this particular thing and fast forward 10 seconds or whatever, or you can shove it up your ass.
Yeah, you can shove it up your ass. Let's just put it, you know. I mean, we're the ones I told you a couple weeks ago, we were on here, we were recording, and I said, I don't even know what's mine and what's not mine at this point. Because I'm so terrified in myself, and now I'm feeling all of this, and I can't do anything about it. It's like no matter what I do, I can't alleviate it. So I know we're not the only ones out there dealing with this, and so sometimes it's good just to know that somebody else is dealing with it too, that they understand you, and that we're here for you because we get it, we get you, you know. So. If there's one thing I've learned over the last, 4 years now, is that we have this core group of people who we care about, who care about us, and they get it.
Yeah.
And what more can you ask for? You know? So let's talk about, okay. So Dave and I got rid of our cable because we didn't want to spend like the exorbitant price every month. And we ended up getting, we bought a new TV that is like monstrous. It was great. And it's another smart TV. And so we got an Amazon Fire Stick. And so a lot of times now we don't watch mainstream television. We watch like Law and Order, SVU, some of those, you know, but we're a sports household. So we watch hockey, baseball. We'll watch that a lot, but we've also been watching a lot of YouTube in the past, 8 months or so. And Jason Hawes from Ghost Hunters has his own channel. There is, do you remember Destination Fear?
Yep.
They have one, it's called Project Fear, so they have their own channel now. And Dalen Spratt from the Ghost Brothers has a channel that I love because guess what? Dalen Spratt does what Dave and I do, and he goes to cemeteries. He calls them resting communities. And he goes and he speaks to the spirits there. He uses a spirit box. That's something Dave and I are going to do more of this summer, because until this summer, we've really been mostly doing K2 meter, Mel meter, REM pod type stuff to communicate. We did get an EVP from the Goosemans at Oakwood Cemetery in Syracuse last year, the year before. So those have been our choices, but he uses a spirit box. And so we're going to start using a spirit box and see what we come up with. And I'm hoping to maybe video some of them to see what we can get from it. But anyway, so those are some of the channels. And then there's Katrina Weidman, who was originally on Paranormal State back in the late, like 2000, I think it was like 2005 to 2012-ish, with Ryan Buell and all of them. And then she did some other stuff. She did a show called Paranormal Lockdown with Nick Groff from Ghost Adventures. Not a huge Nick Groff fan. He did really well in that series. I think they did 2 or 3 seasons of it. They did one overseas in the UK. He's a little bit, I like him because he's anti-Zach because of all the things Zach has done to him. But he's also a little bit of a drama. He's very dramatic, like overly dramatic.
We would call that a drama queen. Yes.
Yes. Whereas Katrina has always been very like low key with things. And even though she's never really come out to say it, I really do believe she does have abilities. She is at least somewhat sensitive. And then she did some stuff with Jack Osbourne, which
Right.
I love, who I love. I love Jack Osbourne. Jack Osbourne will tell you, he also has his own channel, will be the first to tell you that he is not really a paranormal investigator per se, but he's always been so interested and curious in it, and he's very willing to learn about it. And I like that about him. He'll be the first to tell you he's no expert. He's not even really would consider himself that. But so we've been watching Katrina's channel for about a year now. It's called, well, it's under her name, but she does videos and investigations of Travel the Dead is what it's called. And so last night we were watching part 1 of a video that she and I can't remember her name, and I don't know why off the top of my head, but she and one of the other girls who used to be in Paranormal State years ago, Heather Taddy, and they went to Madison Seminary in Madison, Ohio. It's not that far from Mansfield State Reformatory, which is where they shot. What did they shoot?
Shawshank.
Thank you, Shawshank. And that place is crazy off the hook, of course. I'm always one of those people. I would love to go to those places, Todd, but I feel like they're so overdone and they're so saturated, which is something that we'll talk about in a minute, that they're so saturated that I just don't know how much you're really getting out of it there. I much prefer places that haven't been investigated too often, because I think you get a more organic investigation, a more organic
Connection, communication, yeah.
Interaction with everything. So they were at Madison Seminary. I keep wanting to say cemetery. And just a little bit about it. It's a historic building. It's in private ownership, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. And it functioned previously as a school, a hospital, housing for the families of those killed in the Civil War. I believe at one point it was some sort of asylum type of thing. It was built around the 1850s, 1860s. And it's considered to be one of the most haunted places in Ohio. So Heather and Katrina went there. They had just wrapped up a Paracon at Mansfield. And they went to Madison Seminary, and they were talking with the owner. Younger guy, probably, I don't know, maybe 40, late 30s, 40. And he had been investigating there since 2010. And then one day he decided he wanted to have it. He wanted to own it. And he stated it sort of like, I became very connected with it and almost obsessed with it, and I wanted it for my own. So he ended up purchasing it. And so it was very interesting. They were talking to him. He's a pretty cool guy, a little bit over the top, but pretty cool guy. And you can tell he's experienced a lot. He's investigated a lot over the years. And he had some interesting theories, I think I would say, about paranormal investigating and spirits and things like that. And I wanted to, three of them stuck out for me. And I want to tell you what they were and see what you think. He said that, so there is a room there, I think it's called, and a lot of these places have this, and I've noticed that, and I don't know, it's kind of odd. Rolling Hills has one too. There's a room there with all children's things, and there were children there, but there were all children's things, and they call it like Sarah's room or Sally's room.
Yep.
Thing. And people believe that there's a young girl there. And he says that we as the investigation community, tend to assume that we know exactly what's there, when in reality, we don't. We assume maybe because we asked a question and something lit up. Are you a child? And it lit up. That, well, that means there's definitely a child there. He said, I could go in that room and get an EVP that sounds like an adult male. So that was one thing that I thought was interesting, Todd. And it's true that even the most seasoned investigators sometimes tend to, and I'm not talking about those who are sensitive, because that's a different level. But as investigators, we as a community tend to sometimes assume that we know what's going on in a location, even though there's no way of knowing for sure. And I thought about that, and I think he's right. And then he led on with, do we create it? Do we as the collective mind, and we've talked about this before, I think we saw it on Kindred Spirits in an episode as well. If enough of us believe that there is a spirit named Sarah who lives in a room in Madison Seminary, do we ourselves create that spirit?
Right.
And we saw that in Kindred Spirits. They actually made up a spirit, and I can't remember the name, but they created an entire life story to see if they would get things that fell in line with the story. And they knew it wasn't true, but they made it up. And as time went on, they started to get responses to things that would fall in line with this made up fake person who, they quote unquote lived in the past. There was a famous experiment, I think in Canada several years ago, where they created this persona, and over a year's time, they had this group of people that they would try communicating, and not everybody knew that it was fake, obviously. And over time, this thought form emerged and created a spirit that never existed. The power of the mind is amazing. And so I thought those were two very interesting thoughts that he had, that A, we assume that we know what's there, even though we can't ever for sure know what's there. And B, are we creating some of these experiences ourselves because that's what we expect? So if we assume that there was a Sarah in there, and he's like, I don't even know where the name Sarah came from. If we assume that there's a Sarah in there and we assign that Sarah a name, are we creating that ourselves?
Well, I mean, think about this. It's classic manifestation.
Yep.
There are people who have powers to manifest, right? And they're very strong. They can manifest things on their own with the help of the universe and all that kind of stuff. If you have enough people willing something to be, you're creating it. And
exactly.
One of the other podcasts that I do is called Real Ghost Stories Online, and I do it with a guy by the name of Tony Bruschi. And Tony always says to me, I just wonder what is really past energy and what people are creating themselves. And, that's why for me, it's hard for me to say, well, I'm going to go investigate ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even say that anymore because my interpretation of what a quote unquote haunting may be could include past lives, could include current manifestations, could include a parallel timeline that we're not seeing. I mean, there's just so many things that could be going on here. We have been taught to believe it's always a dead person and that they've lived some sort of tragic life that's why they're stuck. We don't know. And so until you're ready to take a step back and go, well, let's just see what we get and then say, well, this is what we got. We don't necessarily know what it means exactly.
Or there's something going on. We know there's something going on. But what exactly that is, I don't know. And I think there's a fear in the paranormal community sometimes, not all the time, but occasionally you run across it where people want so badly to quote unquote prove the afterlife that they're willing to bend the thought process of what's happening to fit their narrative. And it happens a lot. And that's why I wanted to first address this from the side of let's take all of the psychic or medium abilities that I experience and I truly believe do happen. But let's take that out of the equation and just look at it in black and white. And I do think that we collectively tend to look at anything that's not, quote, normal as paranormal, and we label it. And I don't think that's the smartest thing to do. And I will say, when I first started investigating, I was very eager to do that because it made it easy to prove my point, so to speak. I knew I believed in the afterlife, but here's Joe Schmo who lived in 1865. Everybody told me Joe Schmo was there. Well, lo and behold, I get an EVP. Well, it's got to be Joe Schmo. And that's proof of the afterlife. We all do that to some degree, not everybody the same as others. And I think over time in investigating, and I don't even know that I investigate anymore. I think I just explore. I think I explore the possibilities of what's going on. And you're right, to your point, parallel universe? Of course. There's a big possibility that there's parallel universes. Is it universi or universes? There's a big possibility of it, right? There's a big possibility of a lot of freaking things. They've proven that wormholes exist, So I really thought that was interesting that he thinks that way as someone who owns a very active place and who has been investigating for many years. So I thought that was a really cool thought process because you don't hear that a lot. You don't hear investigators like doing what you and I are doing now and exploring the different possibilities of what's really going on in a location.
And here's why that is. Because as a society, we love to have information fed to us. Mm-hmm. So we want somebody to say, oh, there's ghosts. Look at this. This is a ghost. Mm-hmm. We want that. And whether it's religion, whether it's politics, whether it's whatever, school, we want to just be told what the answer is, and then we'll try and retain that. We don't want to have to go through any type of work to try and figure it out. You know, as you were talking, you know, outer space, right? We don't know everything that's out there. We know more now than we did even 50 years ago, but we don't know what's out there. And to think that radio signals and TV signals that we have broadcast here on this earth are still out there and people can pick up millions and zillions and gazillions miles away and all that kind of stuff is another thing where you go, okay, well, maybe we're experiencing stuff from another planet, from another solar system, we just don't know. And so I
had an epiphany a whole bunch of years ago. It was a beautiful summer night.
So is an epiphany like a dual, is it epiphanies or epiphany? Sorry.
I've had several epiphanies. No, I'm kidding. But it was a beautiful summer night, and I went out and sat on my front porch, and it was clear, and it was warm, and I just sat on my porch, and I was looking up at the sky, and it just kind of hit me that the light that I'm seeing from these stars, it actually happened millions of years ago.
Right.
And I'm just seeing it right now. If that doesn't give you an idea of the beauty and the awe and the vastness of what we're like the ant on the sidewalk. You know, if you want to put it in perspective, we are the ant on the sidewalk. We have zero answers about anything, nothing. And I'm not saying that spirits and ghosts don't exist because I've experienced them myself. I'm not saying that's not it. I'm saying that not everything that we experience has that explanation. And I think part of being very well-rounded and open-minded is to accept the fact that not everything that we experience is always what we want to call it, what we want to name it, what we want to say that it is, that it could be other things. And there's a beauty in that, I think. I think there's a beauty in the idea that there's so many other things that are going on that we just aren't even aware of, you know?
Right. Or that we're willing to accept this, but not that. So It always bothers me when people who believe in paranormal, specifically ghosts or past energies, can't believe in things like UFOs or aliens or Sasquatch or anything like that. You can believe this, which is not something we can necessarily always see, feel, hear, taste, whatever, right? But you'll believe that, but you won't believe this. And another prime example is I know somebody who believes very deeply in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, but apparently Jesus was the only one that was allowed to have that kind of energy. The rest of us do not. So again, you're more than willing to believe in a Father and a Son and a Holy Spirit and everything surrounded by the religion that you follow, but you're not willing to accept that maybe this other stuff could also have some truth to it.
Exactly. Now, here's why, now speaking from a psychic type of perspective, here's why I always feel like in order to have a well-rounded investigation, I think it is important to include people with sensitivities. Do I think that people with sensitivities, psychics, mediums, empaths, get it right 100% of the time? Of course not. But I will say from my own personal experience, and I go in as both an investigator and as a psychic, I will say that it truly has helped not only me in my journey of learning and exploring the paranormal world, but it's also helped those on my team or those who are with me by helping us to understand a little bit more. And this varies with everyone with abilities. Everybody is different. So, for example, and he also said too, and I like this, that people always wonder why some nights it'll be, pun intended, dead in a location, and some nights it'll be crazy active. And what I can say to that is that from my experience, so for example, a few years ago, our apps team investigated the 1834 Herkimer County Jail. There were two rather famous inmates there back in the 1800s, early 1900s. There was Chester Gillette, who murdered his pregnant, quote, girlfriend, Grace Brown, and he was being held there. He's infamous. That was around, I think it was 1907-ish. And then there was Roxalana Drews, Roxy, who was the first, the last woman, maybe first woman, hung in New York State for murdering her husband. And I was fortunate enough to be able to connect with both of them. In a little bit different ways, but I connected with them. Now, Sue, who's on our team, connected with Roxy, but didn't seem to connect with Chester. Well, you'd say, well, if Sue, and Sue's abilities are a little different than mine. Sue can channel. I don't channel. I have different abilities. But how can Sue and I both connect with Roxy, but I only connect with Chester? And one of the things that I think is because a lot of the activity that you come across has to do with when you pass over, you still have consciousness, and that some level of consciousness, and that still means that you are intelligent. Just like we have people, you know, the old saying, Todd, just, you know, if you're an asshole in real life, you're going to be an asshole after you die. It's the same kind of idea. If you, let's say, don't like somebody or don't feel comfortable with someone on the other side, then you're not going to allow yourself to connect with that particular living person. You choose who you connect with. So we might go to a location one night and I'll feel the female energy or the male energy and get the name and get the situation and the emotions, and I'll pick up on all of that. But someone else who is a psychic medium may not. And I think we put too much power in our own hands and not enough in the power of the spirits for discerning who they want to. If you've got a group of people going in there joking around, laughing, not being serious, not taking things, not acting respectfully, who would want to deal with that? I wouldn't want to deal with that. You know, we did an investigation of a library that had never been investigated before a few years ago. And it was really quiet that night. And I picked up a lot of trepidation, and I really feel like the spirits who were in there, and there were some spirits in there, I feel like intelligent spirits, there was a lot of residual too, but I feel like they were scared because they didn't understand what we were doing. They didn't know what was happening. And even if you try to explain it to them, it doesn't always translate well. And so I think that's important to remember, that just because you go to a place and don't get a lot doesn't mean that a person that you're with isn't going to experience things, or the whole team may not experience something, but then the next team that comes in says, oh my gosh, it's so active. It's all up in the air. It's all on a per experience basis. And we forget sometimes that these spirits are intelligent and can discern and, you know, aren't there for us to command. They have their own minds. So I just thought that was interesting. Oh, and one more thing that I took away from this video before we wrap up. this gentleman, I can't remember his name, who owns the Madison Seminary, made an amazing point. And Michelle Belanger, who everybody knows I adore, and she, without realizing it, is sort of my mentor in my psychic journey, once said that Gettysburg, for example, is so incredibly active with residual energy, but it's not all from the actual battle. There's tons of it is from the original battle. But the land in Gettysburg and throughout most of Pennsylvania is a lot of limestone. You'll see when we go in June, Todd, you'll see that the boulders are huge and they're thousands upon thousands of years old. The Devil's Den especially. And you'll feel it when you touch it, you'll feel it. And we all know limestone takes in energy. So what Michelle said, and this gentleman alluded to it too, is that over the years, there are layers upon layers of energy that are embedded into the atmosphere, into the ground, into the rock at Gettysburg. So not only is it the battle itself, but it's the farmers who lived and worked on that land. It is the reenactors who have come over the years and reenacted the battle over and over again that leave their mark. When we go there, Todd, we'll leave our energy there. We'll leave some parts of our energy there. And he brought up this idea that we don't know, again, going to his first one, that we assume we know what's there. We don't know what is energy from the original people that were there in that building and on that location, or is that energy that's been coming from us as well over the years in investigating there and the different things. So layer upon layer upon layer. And he said that it seems like that building, that location itself is ever evolving, and that things change all the time because there's more energy coming in there all the time from different people. And we bring our emotions and we bring our history and we bring our things with us when we go. But that was an extremely interesting thought about locations. We don't stop to think about that. Again, another reason why I think it's important to try to go to places, if you really want to learn, if you just want to thrill, go to all the places that have been, investigated a million times. Go. And for history's sake, I want to go to them. But if you really want to explore, I think it's important to try to go to places where there hasn't been as much investigation, because I think that's where you get more of a true reading of what actually is going on in a location.
That makes sense. Yeah. I would agree with that. You get a cleaner representation of what is there.
That's a great way of putting it. Yes, a cleaner, more organic representation of what is really happening that enables you to figure it out. There's Gettysburg, for example. There is just so much residual energy there. The stories I could tell from my 3 visits to Gettysburg over the last 15 years, I could tell you a million stories. And experiences that I've had. And it's just phenomenal, both intelligent and residual. But there are hundreds of years of layers of energy in this town. The entire town is the battlefield. People have monuments on their side lawn of where something happened, right on their side lawn of their home. It's just fascinating. So there's nothing wrong with experiencing that at all. It's one of my favorite places in the world. But I think it's important if you are serious about it. That's why we like cemeteries too, because not many people go with the kind of respect that we try to go with, and the interest in learning the stories. And, I think that's why we're so successful with it, is because nobody ever does that. How many people actually do that? How many people actually want to know from these spirits about them and what their story is. And I think they're grateful. And that's a very organic, that's a very good representation of who that person is a lot of times. So
Cool.
So just some really cool thoughts from that. It's Katrina Weidman's channel. She's a little bit slow on, getting everything out because she does an amazing job with it. Whoever does her video editing is fantastic. And so part 1 came out, but she's got a whole bunch. You've watched them. Part 1 came out, but she's got a whole bunch of videos from different investigations that they've done. And I really love her style of very low key investigating. So check out that one too. And Dalen Spratt from Ghost Brothers and all the other ones. They're good.
They're good, clean fun.
Good channels to watch. Anyways. So if anybody has any thoughts themselves, email us, thesandyandtoddcast@gmail.com. Send us a message either on our Facebook page or in our group, Stay Weirdos, Friends of the Sandy and Toddcast. I'd love to hear what you guys think about these things. Has anyone ever investigated any of these places or investigated in general? And what are your thoughts on those theories? Because I think that's really interesting. It's the only way we're going to learn from each other is if we throw our ideas and our thoughts out there. All of the contacts will be right in our show notes too. So.
All right. Sounds good. So episode 4 is now done. Moving on our way to episode 8 to finish up the season. So
yep.
We'll see when we get together again. Maybe next week, maybe the following week, whatever. But
yeah. Just be watching for us.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right.
Until next time, from the Sandy and Toddcast. Bye.
Bye.
We make podcasting easy. Mindgarden Media can get you going on your very own podcast. With many years in the broadcast and audio industry, Mindgarden Media can edit, fully produce, and provide all the web distribution services. We're podcasters too, so we'll guide you every step of the way to a professional-sounding podcast production. For information, email the Mindgarden Media at gmail.com, the Mindgarden Media at gmail.com, or check us out on Facebook.